Hello and welcome to the Weekly Defence Podcast. This week brought to you in partnership with our sponsor, Raytheon Intelligence and Space. I'm your host, Ben Vogel, and I'm joined by senior land reporter Tim Fish and air editor Tim Martin. Welcome back.
Hi, Ben.
Good evening.
Coming up in this episode, we discuss some of the main stories from the land and air domains, including an update on the US Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft programme. And in an interview with Supacat, we look at the wider implications of the UK integrated review on some British Army land programmes. This is a little bit later in the show, but first, let's take a look at some of the top stories from this week in defence. On the 4th of May, French company Dassault confirmed a follow-on order from Egypt for 30 Rafale multi-role fighter aircraft in an estimated €4 billion deal. This will bring to 54 the number of Rafales in the Egyptian Air Force. The delivery schedule for the 30 extra Rafales was undisclosed at the time of the announcement, but Shephard has since learned that the contract has still not officially been signed, as a bank loan needs to be finalised that is 85% guaranteed by the French state. Shephard also learned that a contract signature is expected in June or July, with deliveries taking place between 2024 and 2026. Boeing is poised to provide India with 6 additional P-8I Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft after the US Defense Security Cooperation Agency notified Congress that the State Department approved the potential sale. The DSCA noted on the 3rd of May that together with sensors, other equipment and training services, the FMS package is worth an estimated $2.42 billion. Industrial offsets are likely to be required by the Indian government. And it's worth mentioning that India previously bought 8 P-8Is from Boeing in 2009 in a direct commercial sale, adding 4 more in 2016. And in Southeast Europe, Elbit Systems has successfully completed acceptance tests for combat suites aboard the Hellenic Coast Guard's new patrol vessels. The tests were conducted in the Aegean. They included integration-level tests of the combat systems and subsystems on board the vessels, as well as live firing tests from onboard remote-controlled weapon stations. Elbit supplied and integrated a number of systems, including its Spectro XR electro-optical payloads, radars, and remote-control weapon stations. These systems were provided with full integration into command and control software. And finally, to Russia, where Moscow's ambitions to increase self-sufficiency in defence microelectronics seem as far away as ever. Rostec CEO Sergei Chemezov warned recently that his companies are accelerating the development of domestic microelectronics. He stated, quote, "as foreign deliveries can be stopped at any time." This is easier said than done, however. On many occasions in recent years, a Russian government, right up to the level of President Vladimir Putin, has identified the problem of over-reliance on microelectronic imports without actually being able to implement a solution. By 2020, domestically made microelectronics accounted for just 10% of the Russian market. The need to ensure technological independence from foreign suppliers requires Russia to spend big over an extended period of time. But whether Russia can actually do this and guarantee stable funding in the country's post-COVID economy remains debatable. And on that note, we conclude the headlines, so let's get stuck into some more stories. This time bringing into the conversation our domain editors. And Tim Martin, let's start with you on the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft programme. What's caught your eye?
Thanks, Ben. There was an update from the US Army on FLRAA, and their program manager, Colonel David Phillips, was talking about latest developments and what's going to happen once contract decision is made in the summer of 2022. But I asked him a couple of questions just on costs and program risks. I think they're key issues for FLRAA in particular, because there was an average manufacturing cost relating to an RFI that was released back in April 2019, which said that the cost would be around $43 million. So in terms of whether that's a sound estimate 2 years on, the US Army weren't really able to talk about that. And Phillips said that unfortunately, in order to maintain the integrity of competition. The US Army are no longer kind of disclosing those types of details. And then similarly on program risks. So just to get back to why there were program risks identified and why we know this is because the US Army had sent a draft RFP to industry in December of 2020. And when they got feedback from industry, they confirmed that there had been risks identified. So I asked if Colonel Phillips could elaborate on what those risks were. And he said again, unfortunately, that he's prevented from doing so or commenting on that. But he did at least say that affordability has been an issue that has been talked about by the Army and thought through fairly comprehensively, and that's under the latest phase, the competition design and risk reduction, phase 2. And so the award for that contract was given to Bell, of course, running with the V280 and the joint team of Sikorsky and Boeing, who have the Defiant X, the coaxial aircraft. So that's kind of the focus at the minute is CD and RR phase 2. And in essence, what will happen on that front is that preliminary design activities will go ahead, and then industry will be expected to finish all of that up in March of 2022. And a couple of months later, then we'll find out who's the winner when there's a contract award for FLRAA, and then subsequent EMD activities will begin.
So despite the fact that it's emerged that US Army wants to keep these costs and risks confidential, it's not really affecting the timetable for the programme. Is that fair to say, Tim?
Yeah, I think that's a good observation, Ben, definitely. And I think to give the US Army its due, because it has faced a lot of criticism based on historical comparisons with the failure of Comanche and the fielding of aircraft that was expected previously and for one reason or another didn't go ahead, that actually they have very rigidly stuck to down select milestones and to making sure that the program is in good health. And so it doesn't seem to be, from my reading of it and having reported on it kind of fairly consistently for the last 2 years or so, there doesn't seem to be anything off in terms of where industry are at in their development of the aircraft and in terms of where the US Army are in terms of funding. And that's also backed up, to be fair, with conversations I've had with defence analysts as well. So yeah, by and large, there's very strong prospects here for FLRAA to happen in line with expectations. And so certainly you have to kind of commend the Army for doing so, particularly off the back of not being able to have done it in the past, as I mentioned.
Indeed. So there may be lessons there for other US Army programs to bear in mind in future, despite the fact that these manufacturing costs and program risks they're clearly a factor. They're not really interfering with the program's schedule as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably just one mention of what industry said on, the idea of program risks and things like that, because I thought it was an interesting quote from a Bell spokesperson. They said that they wouldn't be able to identify the questions that they sent back to the Army in the draft RFP. But from the standpoint of what normally happens with programs, when you step from a science and technology demonstrator to a program of record, there's always the valley of death to cross. And so I think what the spokesperson is getting at there is that, yes, from very often there is uncertainty as you approach the conclusion of a tech maturation program and then into a formal program of record. And there probably will be a little uncertainty or unease on the US Army's part, potentially, whenever the defence budget from the Biden administration is being set, and we're expecting that to be made public in the next couple of weeks. So, potentially there might be some difficulties on that front. But whenever you ask the Army, as I say, consistently over the last number of years, they've always said that funding is secure. So I'd be very, very surprised, actually, if there is something that upsets the apple cart here whenever the funding goes ahead.
Indeed, and the Valley of Death, a very nice Charge of the Light Brigade reference. Hopefully it doesn't share the same fate as the Charge of the Light Brigade. And Tim, you'll keep in touch on this particular programme and various other ones on the air domain very closely. And we will await further developments. Moving on to land now. And Tim, you've got a story from Canada this week. What's going on with a light armoured reconnaissance system for the Canadian Army's LAV?
Yeah, I mean, I've been following up on the program because the light armoured vehicle reconnaissance and surveillance system was due to be handed over in early last year, and then the initial operating capability was supposed to be due at the end of last year. So I was just sort of chasing up on where they're at with that, and it turns out that a company, one of the subcontractors on the program, has gone bankrupt, and this has caused about a 12 to 18 month delay into providing that capability. The light armoured reconnaissance and surveillance system is like a system that's put on a sort of a 10-meter mast with all kind of sensors on it, and a processing system in the vehicle that allows sort of those vehicles, the LAV vehicles, to see much further. And it's designed to replace a bunch of Coyote vehicles that were supposed to leave service in 2019.
Indeed, 141 of them. Yeah.
So those vehicles are now going to stay longer because of the delay. I think they were due, because they were due to retire in 2019. So initial operating capability is now expected at the end of this year, with a final operating capability expected in February 2023. I'm still digging around to find out which company it is that's gone bankrupt, has caused this delay. It seems to be, judging from what the Canadian DND has told me, is that most of the systems are being delivered, apart from a surveillance system that includes the mast and some of the components on it.
That's pretty big. That's a pretty big gap.
And that was to DRS land systems. So that they're still good to get back to me about that. But the deliveries of the turret day sight and laser rangefinder from Elbit have been delivered. Something called energy attenuating seats from Armatech have also started. And I think it was only just the other week, a company called Galvian has delivered the Silent Watch battery pack system, which means that the vehicles can actually do their observations with the engines off and run on battery power, which sort of reduces their signatures and ability to be detected. So there are a lot of the components are all being delivered on time, and they're being integrated. But this one particular system from a subcontractor has caused this extra delay to the program, which obviously has knock-on effects to the overall capability that's been delivered, and also how long the existing Coyote vehicles have to stay in service. So it's good to kind of sort of dig into that, and there's a little bit more to come. So hopefully that'll be ready for the story this week.
Indeed, and listeners, stay tuned. Also in the land domain, Tim, we have a story from Gordon Arthur about armour procurement in Australia. Why did that catch your eye?
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on Gordon's story because it kind of highlights a foreign military sales contract with the United States to acquire a bunch of Abrams tanks, which they're going to convert into modernised M1A2 variants, including assault breacher vehicles, Hercules armoured recovery vehicles. And it's a real significant uplift in the Australian Army's armoured capability. I mean, there's been a bit of controversy about the Abrams tank purchase because it's kind of pushing the Australian Army into more of a European land army kind of a role, something which is questionable whether it's well suited for the kind of Asia-Pacific environment, because not only do you have to, the question is, what are you going to do with these main battle tanks? They're big, they're very capable, but they're in Australia. So if you want to deploy them anywhere, you'd have to ship them, and that means, with all their supporting equipment as well. So that's not an easy undertaking to do, and it's not going to be a short distances either. So when you look at the kind of the amphibious capability they have, and that the new upgraded tanks won't actually be able to fit on the existing amphibious transport landing craft, then it raises questions about how they're going to move these things around. But that's saying, I mean, it's a significant kind of uplift in what they've got exist with them at the moment with their current fleet of M1A1s. So I guess it kind of runs in line with what they're doing with their Land 400 program when they're buying heavy armoured boxer vehicles, and also they've got a tracked infantry fighting vehicle coming as well. So it really is pushing the Australian Army into the sort of the next league above in terms of land army capabilities and the desire to kind of deploy a sort of a full armoured combat brigade in the future somewhere.
Indeed, and as you say, unless the Australians procure new kind of amphibious transport platforms, those new tanks that they're buying will be effectively stuck on the admittedly rather large land mass, Australian landmass. So it's an interesting story, and more details on Gordon's and Tim's stories will be available on our website. Okay, thank you both very much for your time today. Just a reminder for our listeners, if you'd like to find out more about Shephard's daily defence news coverage, previous episodes of the podcast, video content and more, please visit our website, shepherdmedia.com/news. Coming up after the break, I speak to Supacat for UK industry reaction to the integrated review and the future of some key British Land Forces programmes. Stay with us.
Hello, my name is Andrew, and Shephard has asked me to speak to you about my experience with Defence Insight, Shephard's all-in-one market analysis tool that has helped me spend less time finding opportunities and more time winning them. With full market data at my fingertips, I'm able to identify upcoming and lapsed programs, see the bids that won and failed, and, this is the part that really helps, beat my competition to opportunities and increase my win rate. Shephard's tool brings together programs, systems, and subsystems into one integrated location, so you can see the entire supply chain. So whether you're a researcher, business developer like me, or your role is focused on strategy development, see how powerful Insight can help improve your everyday with a free product demo. Contact the experts at insight@shepherdmedia.com.
The UK government's integrated review of defence, security and foreign policy in mid-March, followed a week afterwards by the MOD command paper, sought to bring clarity to a number of specific British defence programmes and strategies. Headlines for the British Army were the decision to progress with the Ajax and Boxer procurement and the Challenger 3 upgrade. At the same time, the MOD terminated the Warrior upgrade programme. But what about other land programmes, and how readily will new technologies be accepted in vehicle programmes? With me to look into these and other questions is Phil Applegarth, Director and Head of UK-based vehicle manufacturer Supacat, and Steve Austin, Engineering Director and Chief Engineer at Supacat. Phil and Steve, welcome back to the Weekly Defence Podcast.
Hi, good to see you, Ben, and thanks very much for having us today.
Okay, so now we've all had a few weeks to digest the contents of the integrated review and command paper. How, from your perspective as a UK defence industry manufacturer, have the command paper actually hit the target? And secondly, where is it off target? Where is more clarity needed for industry? Perhaps you've got some perspective there, Phil.
Yeah, I think you do. Yes, we finally received the long and eagerly awaited integrated review. And actually, I thought it was better than expected. And I was intrigued by one of the comments that Ben Wallace came out with, which was not for the promises of novelty. We'll see how that pans out. Sadly, Warrior was the biggest loss in this area, but it wasn't unexpected, I don't think. And MRVP seemed to find itself slipping away through the whole of the IR without any references to it. Quite strange, really. Not to dwell on that, my two biggest takeaways, apart from cementing the biggest of the programs, was the implementation of the industrial land strategy, which I hasten to add is long overdue, and the positive direction of applying focus and vision to the areas of future structures of people and equipment. If you're going to go and make people do more with less, then you have to give them the right tools and equipment to do so. And I think the IR actually covers this off. On the other side of your question, off the mark, although not really off the mark, I am interested to understand the details of the delivery. With the reducing headcount, the common cry has basically always been a lack of resources within D&S and the embedded requirement managers to deliver these programs. And if they're not there, they then inevitably are going to stall the programs. And then with the stalling comes the creep that impasses the cash and the schedule.
In a way, this isn't a new problem, is it? It has perhaps been encountered before.
No, it hasn't. But the integrated review did touch on the valley of death. And it will be a real travesty if it's not going to be supported after all this effort to balance the books and make sure defence is fit for the fight. But in truth, I think I'll believe it when I see it, D&S recruiting or restructuring on this to deliver it.
Steve, do you have anything to add?
Well, I certainly concur with everything Phil said, but there is a lot to be commended in the integrated review and the command paper. And I think beyond that commitment to the big projects, I'd pick out the commitment to R&D investment and the green industrial revolution, an alignment of future spending reviews to those papers, a commitment to persistent presence overseas through forward deployment. I think gives some consistency and planning, which is great. Adaptability, agility and effectiveness of our armed forces and the crucial role of digital integration. I think we'll pick up that theme a little bit later on potentially. And I think, as Phil said, also this sort of greater government support through the valley of death for product development and to commercialisation of a product, including protection of UK IP and provision of safe investment. And accepting more risk in public investment, I think, was an interesting phrase that I picked up there as well.
Now, the command paper gives some pretty strong hints as to the capabilities that the MOD wants to develop. So, based on the information that you have, Phil, are there any projects that Supacat will accelerate? And on the other side of the coin, are you having to deprioritise anything?
I think taking the acceleration, I think we are heading down, and actually taking the reprioritisation, I don't think so. We're heading down a development path in line with what we can see the technology advances. But I think the thing that we need to ensure is that our marketing includes that we don't just design and manufacture great vehicles. We design, manufacture and integrate great battlefield winning systems through the collaborating with many of the industrial partners to do so. I think I'm going to flip this over to Steve and see what his thoughts are too.
Thanks, Phil. So I think that's right. An area that comes out strongly in a couple of places is this need for a digital background for interoperability and integration with other domains, for agility and connectivity relevant to the sort of current threats and future threats. And we do anticipate that we'll accelerate our work in this area in collaboration with others. And I think further to that, we need to be able to help the MOD define its requirements and evolve rules and standards to reflect the art of the possible for digital backbones and electronic architectures, where that delivers this operational advantage at a strategic and a tactical level. And that includes the integration of optionally manned and automated systems and autonomous systems, as well as the through-life advantage as well. And I think there has been a considerable amount of investment, both from UK industry, but also the government as well. And I think we as an industry need to help the taxpayer capitalise on that investment that's already been made and make it work for the MOD and make it work for the armed forces.
Speaking of making everything work for the MOD and the armed forces and also industry, there is some talk of a special land industrial strategy being developed at some point this year. I saw a statement from the Army that it will, quote, reset the relationship with industry. And the quote went on to say a few other things as well. But I think resetting that relationship might be something that causes you, Phil, to prick your ears up with some interest.
Yeah, that's true, Ben. Without trying to set the hairs running, I think the resetting of relationships with industry, in my opinion, has been flawed in the past. I think I mentioned in my last podcast with you, DSE had been working quite hard with us to help win the export market. But sadly, it's taken far too long, absolutely far too long, to announce it and hard code British SME content into the UK programs. We, as a business, we found it really quite difficult to compete on a level playing field, with imported goods. When some of the big programs, tacking on a few vehicles for a UK MOD program, it just seems like it's the cheap and easy option. But looking at it, there are studies that show the whole life cost benefits of buying British, help support them in the regions, creating jobs in the supply chain. It's all better for the taxpayer. And as we've identified, as identified in your quote, the long-term relationships with the UK MOD, DE&S, etc. The export markets, we always get hit with the industrial participation, the offsets, although that's not a true word. And it's usually around about 100% of the contract values. So again, we long to play on this level playing field, and we long for the day when UK MOD starts hard coding the industrial content into the UK MOD programs. And yes, Ben, you picked up on my frustrations about this long-awaited industrial strategy.
Okay. And Steve, would you like to chip in on that?
Yeah, I think it's product development and product improvement on land vehicles just takes time, and I think one has a choice to make. You take the conservative route and risk seeing the relevance of your kit diminish, either as an engineering company trying to develop and sell these products, or as an armed forces fighting with the vehicles, while the proportion of other nations' kit increases. And that effectively seals off homegrown involvement in a particular capability for a whole product life cycle, which can be many, many years. So the alternative is for all stakeholders to take a sort of a greater commercial risk with product development.
You mentioned product development, and that brings me on to my next question. And I'll start by picking up on something that you yourself said, Steve. You mentioned that defence is very definitely still in a learning phase on electric drive and hybridisation. So now that the command paper's out, do you see any signs of electric drive, hybridisation, technologies like that moving higher up the agenda? For instance, with your electric light rail vehicle?
I don't think there's anything specific that's helpful in the command paper other than with respect to electric drive and hybridisation, other than the renewed commitment to net carbon zero targets and understanding the use of associated technologies. But those targets are still there, which is useful in itself. And I think it's also, the paper also talks about digital backbone, as I said previously, but also the use of digital twins. And I see those as sort of key enablers of the rollout of hybrid and electric vehicles in defence. So if you like, if the commitment is there to those enabling technologies as well, then that will help us grow the capabilities. And as the use in anger grows, we'll understand through digital twinning what we need to do to modify and continue to evolve the capabilities of those vehicles, as is happening in the commercial sector. So yeah, that in itself is useful to see.
And Phil, what's your perspective on this question?
Well, I think absolutely electric or hybridisation or a combination of both are going to be right up on the agenda. I'd like to see any sort of new vehicle programs coming in for deliveries in the sort of 2025, 2026 area have the hybridisation or electric drives within them. So I would like to see them push that up the agenda, and the command paper indicates that. So we'll look forward to it.
And Steve, I wonder if you could give us an update on the hybrid Jackal program, because again, this was something that we did talk about last year. You mentioned that real lessons on the hybrid Jackal program start with the vehicles going out for testing this year. So I imagine it's on the cards fairly soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So we completed our initial part of the project vehicle design and development on time at the turn of the year, which is great credit to all the guys involved in that project in a particularly difficult time. So the vehicle then went off to have the electric driveline components fitted and commissioned with Magtech. We've been supporting commissioning activities remotely through the last lockdown period, I'm glad to say that's now all completed, and the test program is just commencing now. So for everybody involved in the project, all the collaborators, it's exciting times, and we look forward to be able to giving you a further update next time we speak to you in a couple of months' time.
Yes, I mean, what kind of completion date are we talking about for these trials, or are they more open-ended?
That's a very good question. We certainly anticipate the trials going on throughout the year, but we should be able to give you an update on where we've got to in a few months' time.
Thank you very much, and that must be quite exciting for you as well, Phil.
Absolutely. I long to see the day of the hybrid Jackal floating around the plains of Salisbury. It'll be much fun.
And Steve, you mentioned digital twinning and AI as being real enablers for bringing projects from the drawing board to fruition, really helping to accelerate and catalyse that process. Are you able to sort of say to what extent you're already doing this, or is this more of an aspirational kind of thing from an engineering perspective?
That's a great question, Ben. Thank you. So control of our optionally manned ATMP demonstrator is AI enabled. It's embedded into the vehicle's object detection, response and collision avoidance capability, and the localization and mapping capability too, and also aspects of the propulsion control system. So AI very much is part of a capability that's already in existence. It also will be a fundamental part of how we connect to the wider autonomous defence ecosystem as part of the end-to-end autonomous system solution for programs such as the Army's Last Mile Logistics Resupply project. So it is here and it's happening now. And it's also finding its way into our other non-defence programs we're also involved in. But sort of more widely, and I think this is picking up on your aspiration point, AI is also starting to drive how we improve and reduce the design spiral. So, for example, we're involved in putting a consortium together with another defence companies and academia, looking at how AI can be used to learn and then evolve current best design practice. And to use a real life example, it takes something like a suspension system for a conventionally driven vehicle. AI can be used to capture what's already been learnt and successfully applied on an off-road vehicle design to date over a number of years, and then given a set of criteria to work within, the AI-assisted design app can then propose rational designs for, say, a different kind of vehicle, so an electric optionally manned vehicle, which by definition may be operated over different terrain or with a different operating profile once the human has been taken out of the loop or moved to a different part of the loop. So the design loads might be different because the vehicle will be driven in a different way and the drive line is different. So some of the constraints on the design of the suspension system isn't there anymore. So you can take all of that learning and try and apply that to get some proposed alternatives that you can then use a person to sort of select which ones would be best to explore. And I think similarly for digital twinning, we can't profess to be subject matter experts, but we're very much engaged with organisations that are SMEs about how we best leverage this capability on, say, for example, electric vehicle development ahead of or after introduction into service to kind of learn, optimise and then evolve how vehicles are operated and supported as the use case evolves.
So interesting times ahead, and I'll just end by quoting the MOD command paper, which stated, "Artificial intelligence and AI-enabled autonomous capabilities will be essential to defence modernisation." Clearly something to bear in mind for the future. Thank you very much indeed, Steve, and thank you also, Phil, for sparing the time today.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for allowing us to take part again. Much appreciated.
This episode of the Weekly Defence Podcast was brought to you in partnership with our sponsor, Raytheon Intelligence and Space. A big thank you to everybody who took the time to be with us today. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you like and subscribe or leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to know more about the market landscape in the defence sector, visit shepherdmedia.com/subscribe and redeem your free trial to our premium news. where you get international coverage of equipment innovation, company news, programme updates and more from our team of expert journalists. Until next week, thank you for listening.